Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. Once again, I have military.com reporter Steve Beynon here with me. Steve, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
Excellent, man. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I have a normal 9 to 5 job, so Friday is Friday for me. The news never stops, so do you have to do stuff this weekend?
No, it doesn't. We don't have to get into it. But I got some good data on the most popular bases soldiers are choosing to be recruited into, so folks can check that out. It's going up right now.
So what is the most popular base?
Uh, Alaska is
Huh.
like by far roughly. The Army has started this program in February to basically let people pick the base. It's hard to recruit people, and about 6,000 out of the roughly 45,000 people that enlisted this year decided to choose where they want to be stationed. 825 of them went with Alaska. Mind you, it's also dependent on like what MOS you do.
Sure.
Like if
Needs of
you're
the
in the
army.
yeah, needs of the Army. So whatever your MOS is, your pool of bases isn't the 32 options probably. But Alaska by far is where people are going, followed by Carson, Campbell, and Hood.
I can kind of see that since if I mean every military base sucks. Like we'll just there's no good one. They all have their ups and downs, but like if you're somebody who's just like, I really like the vibe of Alaska, of like, this kind of untamed wilderness. It's cold, you can go outside and shoot a gun and nobody gives a shit kind of. I
Yeah.
mean, Alaska really is like the last American frontier in a lot of different ways, so I can understand that. Like if you're going to join and you get a choice, like me, my choice would be anything but Alaska. um,
Yeah, it's not for me, but I definitely get the appeal for
Yeah, I
sure.
get it. I definitely Nate served in Alaska, and it didn't sound like his cup of tea either. But him describing some of the people who were having fun, like, all right, it sounds pretty cool. If you're going to be a soldier and you want to do a bunch of outdoorsy shit, I guess Alaska is the way to go.
I'd probably pick Carson. You got Colorado. It's the only like unfortunate. The Army has this unfortunate effect of every base is frankly kind of in a shithole. Like you got Bragg in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which that place is just completely dreadful.
Now,
Um,
outside of Fort Leonard Wood, though, you have the Uranus Fudge Factory. So, you got a little something there. They have the world's largest belt buckle there. I think they have like a freak show kind of situation,
okay,
like a Ripley's Believe It or Not, but not quite. If you ever come to St. Louis, like
yeah,
I highly recommend Fort Leonard Wood because of the Uranus Fudge Factory, which is in this like, it's set up in this like kind of strip mall looking thing that used to be like back in the day, like, and I mean like 20 years ago. It was kind of referred to as Porn Town because that's where like the Leonard Wood strip clubs and porn places and everything. And there's in fact still a billboard outside of this place, very faded, but it's like of a little girl in like, dressed like she's in the prairie, Little House on the Prairie, and it says pornography pollutes the soul, and it has been there. That has been there for as long as I can remember. Like
this sounds like a good soldier town. I think you've made a good pitch.
and also Fort Leonard Wood has really good museums, like the engineering, the MP, and the chemical engine museums are really well done. So highly recommend those if you are in the asshole of Missouri for some reason in Pulaski County and have nothing better to do. Get yourself onto Leonard Wood and go see some museums, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure.
Just don't stay at any of the barracks because apparently they're all filled with mold.
Yeah, yeah. This has been an issue.
This has been something that that I've interviewed people about for years, going years and years back. Not just mold, but like bad housing, policies and things being broken and just never getting fixed. And it's like, hey, this is affecting the health of my children who literally live in this house. What are you guys going to do about it? And the answer has just consistently been nothing. And the Army, like, I know at one point the Army had like a 99-year contract signed with some company that was doing a shitty job. And they're just like, well, we can't do anything because we signed this contract, which is a very odd thing for like literally the strongest military in the world to say. Is we can't do anything about this contract that we signed, and the people are not like meeting the needs of the soul. Fucking break that contract, you know. So you've got this story that you have. You've got a lot of pictures, and I've seen a lot of videos, and it's just like I had no idea it was this bad. Like some of this stuff. So can you kind of take us through like the last couple of months of your reporting on
Yeah.
this one?
Yeah. So we'll start with Stewart. That might be the easiest way to start this story. That's the most recent one, and then we can maybe backtrack to the issue at Bragg. So
One of many issues at Bragg.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
if the mold at Bragg isn't going to kill you, a special forces guy probably gonna.
so what makes Stewart a news story is almost it is those photos, like you said. There's not. I don't want to oversell on people. The stories, frankly, it's stuff we've heard before. But what makes it unique is just the receipts I was able to get by talking to more than 20 soldiers. This included interviews that went on for over a month. People hitting me up on social media, sending me videos. I FaceTime with a couple soldiers, and they walked me around some of their barracks and stuff like that. And this wasn't just. I was pretty shocked because this wasn't just maybe some mold on the vents or one bad room, as what at least I saw at Fort Bragg when I was there. Um, that these barracks looked like Katrina just happened. I mean, the walls there are just painted with black. It's on the floors, it's on the vents, it's on the doors, it's on their gear. It's all over the place. This isn't just hey, we've had some bad ventilation for a couple months. This looks like the barracks were flooded at a certain point. I mean, it's a completely like just a gross failure of army leadership that this issue would get this far. And I think I've said this before on the show where I think junior enlisted is actually they're kind of the hardest source to get for a story. It's hard to find them. They understandably are difficult to trust people with issues that could get them in trouble. And just the receipts that we talked to 2 dozen of them really tells you how fucked up this was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost 40 at this point, and you know, at the age of 18, 19, 20, you know, I never stayed in barracks. I was always a part timer, but you know, you do when you're doing your annual training. Sometimes you end up in places that are a little, you know, not great. But those like, oh, there's a little mold up there on the ceiling over there. This is like one of the videos I saw. Somebody opened up a closet and it was just all black on the inside, like one of those. Just like I feel like when you walk into a place like that, it punches you in the face. And like I'm of an age now where I would walk into that and look at whatever sergeant is saying this is where you're going to live, and I'm going to tell him to go fuck himself. But you know, an 18-year-old doesn't have that kind of agency at the time, so they're just like, well, I guess this is just how we live here. And it's horrifying. Like this is like you said, it's you don't really get the full scope of it until you watch a video of somebody opening up a closet that they're supposed to put their clothes in, like hang their uniforms in, hang whatever, you know, their kids stuff, their own stuff, and just the entire thing being black, not just a little bit, the entire thing, and being like, and there's no cleaning you can do for that. You have to remove all of that drywall. Like it all has to be cut out. It all has to be abated. It has to be handled with like masks and gloves. But there is no. It's just like, yeah, well, that's just where you're going to live. So kind of, you know, you've got all these people from Stewart to give you some stuff. So where did it kind of go from there?
Right. So Stewart is a very interesting story. So if I can backpedal to Bragg a little bit, because Bragg kind of leads to Stewart. I was working on a profile story about the Sergeant Major of the Army. I basically hung out and traveled with him for most of a week, and that took us to Fort Bragg. And there he did he was going to do a barracks tour. I was invited to do it with him. And we toured what's called Smoke Bomb Hill Barracks. And it's like any other barracks in the Army, they just suck. But I frankly didn't see much of a mold concern there of the 2 or 3 buildings we looked at. But what he saw was definitely unsatisfactory enough to where they evacuated 1,200 soldiers there, and they're still trying to figure out where to put them. Um, And then we wrote a series of stories on Bragg not having a lot of answers of like what they're doing with the soldiers, like what the plan is. And then they did this disastrous press conference where the leaders there are blaming a tracking software system for why they didn't know about it until now. Which is just a total nonsense excuse, right?
That is, yeah. If your tracking software is down, I'm surprised that you haven't heard like from your NCOs or from junior officers being like, "Why is that? Why is everybody living in these disgusting conditions?"
Right, right, and yeah, I don't want to say Smoke Bomb Hill barracks weren't a big deal. I mean, they were disgusting, they were unsatisfactory, uh, but reporting on that issue, and then like I said, the leaders they were effectively saying the way the Army tracks it doesn't give them a good bird's eye view, which it's total bullshit. You know they're a problem, and then those barracks only got shut down not because of the sergeant major of the Army's visit, was because one soldier made a complaint to Congress, and then in a separate instance, a sergeant major at Bragg raised the issue with the Army secretary. So it took the Army secretary stepping in for the Bragg leadership to do anything about it. And mind you, like I'll extend the olive branch to them, where like they can't summon a new barracks overnight, and moving 1,000 soldiers, there just isn't open space to put them. So it's understandably a complicated issue, but they're very flippant. They weren't taking much ownership of the issue. But fast forward a little bit, we write those series of stories, and then of course soldiers read that at Stewart, and then the soldier side of the story is, hey, if you think Bragg's fucked up, look at my barracks. And I start getting all these photos, and how journalism works. One or two people reach out to you, and then I ask them if they can connect me with someone else. They do, and then that person connects me, and it just kind of snowballs up until a point where I was basically holding an impromptu press conference in some private's barracks room, and he kept having different soldiers come in. I kept going in different rooms on tours there. It was pretty hilarious. And then that's when I saw that we all know that the Army has mold issues in barracks. That is not news. But what is news is the severity uh, at Fort Stewart. And what made the story extra bizarre was I do the interview with the senior leaders there, right? And they had a very flippant response to everything. They didn't really seem to care. And I don't say that lightly, because I really don't think most people wake up involved in the Army saying fuck the soldiers. I'm sure it comes across like that. They might make bad decisions, but I don't think hurting the junior enlisted is on purpose. I think a lot of the issue is just being detached from the problem. Um,
Right. They're not living in these conditions. It's one of those you need to grab these senior leaders and say, "No, you need to live here for a week. Live in one of these barracks and then tell me it's not a problem."
yeah, and so the issue stems from DPW, the Department of Public Works, which effectively is in charge of these barracks. Now, where the problem lies is no one can really agree of what the soldier is responsible for and what DPW is responsible for. Now, I think we all agree, Private Snuffy, they clean their room. No one should come in and wipe their Xbox controllers for them and throw their beer bottles out. Um, but when it comes to mold, there's some bizarre fight over Private Snuffy needs to clean it or DPW needs to clean it. They're basically pointing fingers at each other of this is your problem, no, this is your problem. Um, I don't know if a soldier should be responsible for actual infrastructure issues, which I would consider mold an infrastructure issue. And they're not trained to do it. Like mold mitigation and mold cleanup is a blue collar trade skill that people go to school, get certified for. They get licensed by the state. It isn't just putting some soldier with no protective gear and a sponge with bleach.
Look, Steve, they did it with the burn pits for the last 20 years. I guess this is just the mold barracks mold is going to be the new the new burn pits. But yeah, to your point, like this is not an easy like I said, you have to remove entire panels of drywall, and you have to do what you have to take care of whatever it is that's causing the mold too. Like these are not situations where like I've been living here for, I've been living in this barracks, room for 8 months or something like that. And now it's suddenly moldy. Like that's not how it works. So trying to put like, yes, the soldiers need to clean the bathrooms, joint bathrooms. You set up the cleaning detail once a week. Somebody goes in, this squad goes in, cleans the bathroom. That's normal barracks kind of stuff. But as you're saying, like if the air conditioning goes out, that's not up to the soldier to fix it because they don't fucking know how to do that. It's the people who, E2 Private Snuffy, who is an 11 Bang Bang, doesn't know how to clean this, at
Right.
least not effectively.
Right. And like I said, this story wasn't like 3 or 4 Joes complaining about me. This was 2 dozen people and then some. And one of the worst anecdotes was a soldier had an issue with his room. Someone from DPW came in like a full hazmat suit. They looked like they were cooking meth on Breaking Bad. Um, Comes in, looks at the mold issue, the respirator, gloves, white suit, all that stuff. Looks at the mold, turns to the soldier, says, "Yeah, that looks bad. You should clean it," and they walk out. And then it's extra bad because they tell these soldiers to clean with bleach, which does not kill mold. The CDC even says, like, hey, there's a lot of water in bleach. Bleach is good for like if you got one little spot, basically, but for an actual treatment method or large cleanups, it's going to make the mold worse because of the water in the bleach, frankly. And to even add insult to injury for that, the soldiers have to buy their own gear. I found a lot of examples of, first sergeants, commanders, or the soldiers themselves. They have to go to Costco, buy bleach and gloves and all this stuff. So it's not even, so the bad cleanup idea isn't even being provided to them for free.
And not even getting bottles of Simple Green.
No, they're buying all, they're
I
getting
was
all
told
their own.
Simple Green fixes everything. So
I mean, hey, it's badass if you need to clean a floor, but other than to make it smell like you clean good, but that's about it. It kind of what really bugged me and what I found in this is basically local leaders on this issue are totally MIA. And I kind of going back to brag is I know the sergeant major at Stewart cannot summon a barracks building. Like I really do get that. It's an issue that they inherited, and it's an issue they can't fix overnight or ever. But there's also no advocacy behind it. There's no example of, hey, the sergeant majors of these 5 bases wrote a letter to the Armed Services Committee and the Army Secretary outlining, hey, this is our situation. It's fucked up. Here's what we need, right? We need more DPW workers. We need to speed up these timetables. Like Fort Stewart's getting new barracks, but it's not going to be until 2035, right? By the time they fix they build the last new barracks, the first one they built is probably going to be moldy by then. So there's not any examples of even like theatrics done by local leaders. Just even putting out a tweet saying, "Hey, here's the construction plan. It's going to take 10 years." That's ridiculous. So I'm working with partners on the Hill and in the Army Secretary's office to see what we can do about getting these permits done faster. And it might be a moot effort, but I think there would be a lot more forgiveness from the soldier if they at least saw the leaders at least acting like they're fighting for this.
yeah, or showing a little bit of empathy.
Yeah.
Like you can, and I'll tell you, this is every episode has a little bit of dad chat in it. If you show even the slightest bit of empathy, people are going to really appreciate that. If you can look somebody in the eye and say, I understand what you're saying. This is fucked up. I get it. I agree with you. You're going to get so much more leeway. Now, to be fair, you do actually, should follow through with something and try something. But yeah, like once again, your higher leaders aren't living in these situations. And if you could somehow manage to have a on high comes down from Capitol Hill that says every sergeant major must live 1 week in the worst barracks on base, just and let the soldiers vote on it. We can do an anonymous thing of where's the worst room for the sergeant major to have to live in that one of you dumbasses is living in, and put him in there and say, huff it up, sergeant. Because you know what? I tell you what, sergeant major's lungs at the age of 45 or 50 after chain smoking and a good bout of alcoholism as they all have, is not going to show up. It's not going to hold up to mold very well. I'm just going to tell you.
Yeah, and when I was talking to Sergeant Major Fenderson, he's the top enlisted leader of the 3rd Infantry Division, the formation of Fort Stewart. He said a quote that really bugged me. His quote was, and it's in the story, is and this is I'll set it up. So all I asked him was, is there anything you need? Is it more money, more staff, or faster timelines for renovations and barracks, right? That's a very easy question to answer for a leader, I think. All he has to say, yes, Steve, we need to do what we can. Speed of construction. I would love more DPW workers, but that's a pain. Um, and if I sidetrack just a little bit, General Eifler, who's the commander up in Alaska, when I interview him, he's very quick to tell me what he needs. He says, "Hey, we don't have enough mental health care providers. That's BS. I'm doing what I can to get them. We're raising salaries, we're doing recruiting incentives, yada yada yada." But with
Oh,
Fenderson,
all PAO stuff that you that your average
yeah,
sergeant major should have kind of down pat.
mhm. Yeah. Again, like again, like he can't summon new barracks buildings, but he could beat the drum. So I ask him, "What do you need, Sergeant Major?" And then first he tells me that's a loaded question, right? But then I go, no, it's not. Answer it. And then he says, the Army has a plan in terms of how things are budgeted and it's working out. We have a responsibility to make sure soldiers have everything we need. And I think we're getting after it, which is
God, this
complete nonsense. I made it very clear. I said, I have 100 photos and videos, right? I could only unfortunately share a couple of them in public because soldiers kept sending me pictures that gave away their identities because they're in mirror reflections. They have gear with their names on it in the background. But what I shared in the story and on Twitter and stuff is a pretty good summary of what I got. And I said, Sergeant Major, I got black walls. You got soldiers living in filthy conditions. You got DPW requests that aren't getting filled, and you got barracks that aren't going to be built for 10 years. You're telling me there's nothing you need, and that is the disconnection that I saw. The problem is this isn't just moldy buildings in the South because it's humid. It's an issue that's getting ignored, and it's an issue that it's too easy to at least act like you care about this problem. And senior leadership is doing it. I think the Sergeant Major of the Army and the Army Secretary are actually pretty good about beating the drum on this. But it's the local leadership that I think soldiers need right now to see, to beat the drum in public to the press, on social media, on Capitol Hill. Here's what I need, right? That is what I think we need right now.
I mean, in theory, the CSM is supposed to be the top NCO of the base who is advocating for the soldiers. That's the whole point of NCOs is to lead and mentor and train the enlisted people and make sure that they have what they need to be a fit fighting force. And if we're coating their lungs with black mold, that's not actually happening. And hey, it's every sergeant major is going to be a little bit different. Some of them, if you've met more than two, then you've known a good sergeant major and a bad sergeant major. So it's not surprising, but it is kind of. I mean, it's just depressing to know that it's still a problem.
Yeah, yeah, and then there is light at the end of the tunnel, but unfortunately, like I said, these barracks, these new barracks and renovations, it's going to take more than a decade. And I talked to a source in Material Command who's kind of aware of how barracks were built, and what they told me is it takes 5 to 6 years to build a barracks building. And you and your listeners know barracks are not complicated buildings; they're 3-story buildings made out of cinder blocks. There's no complications to them. It's probably as simple as a structure as you can possibly make, and it takes 6 years to do it. Like they're building a condo across the street from my house. It's going to be done in a month. They built the Pentagon in 14 months. So part of this is an issue with federal bureaucracy, but no one seems to want to really take the initiative and at least complain about the
Mm-hmm.
process being too slow.
Right. And as you said, your average E2 cannot really advocate for themselves other than what they have here, which is I have to go to the press. I have to send pictures to this to a journalist so that something can get done because the 19-year-old doesn't know what to do, doesn't know who to go talk to.
No, and like I'm not going to act like it's not good business for me when a bunch of soldiers want to complain about failures of leadership. But like it's sad. You shouldn't have to go to the Secretary of the Army. You shouldn't have to go to Congress. You shouldn't have to go to me. Me writing stories shouldn't be what lights a fire under leadership's asses for what I would consider just basic decency. They held this mold stand down at Fort Stewart to like teach NCOs how to spot and mitigate mold, which they only did that after I told them I was writing a story, right? They did room inspections only after I told them I was talking to people and writing a story. So they did this theatrics for me, which I appreciated. It makes me feel like the pretty girl at the bar when they're doing all these nice things to talk to me about. Hawaii did a similar stand down because I was talking to some soldiers there. Fort Riley also. Someone at Fort Riley thought I was talking to soldiers there. That wasn't the case, but they did some stand down or stuff there too. Um, and all just to tell me in interviews that they're doing stuff, and I'm like, that shouldn't be the motivation. The motivation should be doing it just to do it. It
Right.
shouldn't be
If they've come to
don't.
you, the army is already fucked up. Like, you guys could have done something about this a long time ago, but you didn't. So now we have to talk about it, and then it all becomes like reactive instead of proactive, which is the thing. Which is the thing I fucking hate. I hate reactive when you could have been proactive. Like, you could have. This could have been something that was like fixed and mitigated and discussed, a decade ago, but it wasn't, because we're dumping money into all these useless wars. So because all the money got dumped over there and all the attention was in Iraq and Afghanistan and all the corners we were turning, and back here, everything else is just really falling to shit. So now we have a quote peacetime military again, because we're not involved in large scale operations. And now it's this. Now it's just like, well, shit. What have we done? What have we allowed to happen here? And maybe I I don't want to put like any onus on the individual soldiers that are living there, because I know that, like, soldiers don't spend years, they don't spend a decade in the barracks. They spend some time in it. Maybe they get rank, or they move to they PCS somewhere else, or they get married, or whatever. They move out of the barracks eventually, so new people come in. And you can't just keep putting, maybe privates could clean better, obviously, but I don't think that, like, the occasional messy private that the sergeant has to hem up every week because during room inspections, that's not causing this. This is benign neglect from the military itself.
No, and like I said, I in my fantasy scenario where you have five CSMs from different installations write a letter to the Armed Services Committee and senior service leaders or something. I bet if they did that and did a little media tour with it, I would bet you my next paycheck they could find one member of Congress to write a bill to at least put some money into this issue. But they don't understand advocacy. They don't understand how to use the press. They don't understand Capitol Hill. They don't get that they really have power to at least put more light on this issue, but they're too scared because they're like, oh, this is an issue under me and I'm only here for another year. So how about I just like be quiet, keep my head down, and just like I get out skate free. But they don't want to rock the boat.
Well, we can also talk about this, how it's, your fault, basically, Steve, you and Davis and Haley and everybody, Tom and Seth, who all write all these things. This is why we're not getting people in the army. It's because you're writing all these bad things about the army, because the army keeps doing bad things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say a statistically relevant part of the Army's problems are my fault.
Wouldn't
No,
this article where it says Army Secretary blames bad press for making recruitment woes worse. I like to believe that I'm a part of that too, and that honestly just makes me a little proud. Like, I hope that your recruiting is down because of me specifically telling people not to join the army.
yeah, hey, everyone's got to do their part. So I mean, kind of like on a big level, the active duty part of the army needed to recruit, or they wanted to recruit about 60,000 people this year. They're going to be short about 15,000, and they're just absolutely scrambling. They're letting soldiers like pick the base they want to go to, like we talked about earlier. They're doing like $50,000 enlistment bonuses. They restarted like what is basically fat camp, where if you're too overweight to join, but you're not too overweight, they'll let you go somewhere for a little while, try to lose some weight. They're doing everything. Only 23% of the young American population are eligible to serve. Most of that is due to obesity or minor criminal infractions. Because we haven't a lot of it because we haven't gotten over our marijuana problem for some reason. And the Army Secretary on two occasions, right? The first one was in a interview with Haley Britsky at Task and Purpose about recruiting issues. The Army Secretary says, she said partly is negative media attention on things like suicide and sexual assault in the force. And then she said the same thing. She effectively said the exact same thing at this soldier conference last week. And so she's not blaming the issue itself. She's not saying, hey, people are scared to enlist because of mental health repercussions potentially, or there's a suicide issue within the force. It's the coverage of those issues
Right.
that
It's
she's
because
blaming. That's a big distinction. That's important.
it's because you told people that they have these problems that they're doing nothing about until you say something about it, and then and it's absolutely like this. This is one of those things that is baffling to me. Like, of all the things that you could put blame on here, to say that the people who are telling the stories, which these stories come from your soldiers. So in essence, you're blaming your recruiting woes because your soldiers are unhappy, which is a you problem.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. This is something. I don't want to. I'm not trying to make a direct comparison, but this is something we saw from the Trump administration. We see time and time again, people blame the press for their own problems. It's not, the issue isn't to, they have an issue articulating problems with the force, and they have an issue solving problems. So what do? They basically just shoot the messenger, and that is, they see the press as adversaries, and we do have an adversarial relationship, which is fair, but they see us as hindering their progress versus seeing the issues we cover as the hindrance to their process. Those are two very, very different things.
Right. I mean, it kind of has a feeling of saying that we're trying to cover things up and you're fucking it up for us.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, I'm very concerned that there's top leadership in the Army that is effectively saying, they're like, these issues exist, but what really sucks is people talking about those issues. I wish that wouldn't happen, and that's the impression she's giving out. It's I mean, recruiting is a very complicated issue. There's a lot of reasons for the problem, but the reasons are it's not the press, and frankly, I want to give myself credit that everyone in the world reads everything I write, but I don't think the 17-year-old thinking of enlisting is frankly Googling Army articles. I don't think they really read up on it enough.
Yeah, they're not reading military.com.
Yeah.
I regret to inform you. But and I do want to I want you to take your journalism hat off for a minute and put your soldier hat on, because you are both sides of this coin. You are a reporter who does report on things like this, and you are a National Guard soldier still. So as a soldier, how does something like this, where you are being told that the biggest problem with recruiting is the press, not as a journalist, how do you feel about that as a soldier?
I think Army leadership has really, or some Army leadership, I think the Sergeant Major of the Army has actually been really great at talking about issues with suicide in particular.
It seems to be all right. I haven't. It's Preston, right?
Or Grinston.
Grinston.
Yeah. So he's been really good on that. But you have the Army Secretary. Her job is to run the Army. Her job is to talk to lawmakers. Her job is to talk to the White House, and she hasn't been great about articulating issues that matter to the soldier, or at least in public. That's kind of what is alarming. She can list issues, but I've never really heard her articulate intelligently on those issues in public, or talk about solutions to those problems. It's not, the Army has a suicide issue. So we're investing in these kind of quality of life things. We're putting more mental health counselors and here, and here. And we're, encouraging soldiers to get X number of standard behavioral health appointments throughout the year, or whatever. She's not really bringing solutions when she talks about this issue publicly. And that is what and that kind of goes back to the Stewart issue almost. I don't expect any leader to have a solution overnight that's going to fix the problem 100%. But I think we do need to expect them to at least articulate the issue and try to bring some solutions. Even though solutions are Band-Aids, I'd rather have a Band-Aid than nothing.
Sure. And, just to, again, show any amount of, yes, I understand that this is a problem and it does suck and we're going to try to fix this for you. Because it seems like no matter what, that is always everybody stops short at like, of course nobody wants to take the blame, right? So I don't expect anybody to be like, yes, this is on me, because I know how leadership works. For the vast majority of leaders, especially in the military, there's a lot of can kicking that will happen. That's just the nature of the beast. However, the idea that this is like it that this is just like kind of all in your head, um, and there's no reason for us to acknowledge to you this thing that you're showing us. This is mold. It's bad. Yes, it's bad. We need to take care of this. Something as simple as that. And yeah, Wormoth as well just doesn't seem to have that kind of how to like. I don't know if it's an emotional language. I don't know if it's just that, like, I mean, first off, I believe all politicians are absolute freaks. Just in general, not necessarily sexually deviant, but they're all, there's something going on in their brains that's not going on with the rest of us. Because, like, to be the person who's in charge of the army and to be unable to completely articulate, here are some problems, especially when Christine is a woman. There are a lot of, women soldiers issues that are really coming to the forefront right now. And it doesn't seem like I'm not in the army anymore, but it doesn't seem like the army it doesn't have a good spokesperson right now. Like, you've got Grinston, he seems good, but how long is he going to stick around? He's been SMA for years at this point.
He's actually out next year.
So you're going to get somebody else, and you know what? That guy could fucking suck.
And I'll Grinston's been effectively a pretty decent spokesperson for the army, but like everything can't come from him. The army secretary needs to be more out there. General McConville needs to be more out there. He's not probably as engaged, at least publicly, as he probably should be. And then kind of going back to the mold issue, those local leaders too. So the army as a whole kind of has struggles with messaging. Like I said, Grinston's good, but maybe if you miss his town hall or miss the story I wrote with an interview I did with him, you're not hearing from him. So the army needs to, have multiple people talking about multiple different issues in sequence, right? Other than that, you're just not hitting what the army's either not doing certain things that they should be doing, or they're not telling you. And sometimes that's their own fault because they just don't have the right message, or whether that's about suicide or sexual assault. They're just not engaging with the public and the soldier as much as they should be.
Right. So, are there anything like on these specific bases? Like, I know you mentioned the classes on um, recognizing and abating mold before it gets out of hand. But, like, obviously we see things at kind of the macro 50,000 foot view, because we're looking at things on the whole. But are at least people saying, like, hey, yes, maybe it sucks over there, but here we have good leadership. Here we're doing something. Or is this really just something that, like mold abatement, is this really something that can only be taken care of at a congressional level at this point?
A little anecdote. It didn't make it into the story because I didn't really have enough sources to back up what I was kind of finding 100%. But Schofield Barracks in Hawaii has a lot of the same mold issues as Stewart. But what I was hearing from some soldiers there is the leaders are actually really engaged on the issue, and the DPW there actually does a lot of good mold mitigation, which includes like cutting down drywall, spraying special like mold killer chemicals, and issuing out dehumidifiers and air purifiers, and getting proper ventilation in buildings.
I imagine Hawaii definitely has to be up on something like that.
They sounded on the ball. Now, hey, if you got listeners in Hawaii that want to come to me and said, actually, it's a shit show there, that's fine. I mean, I'm only basing this off a handful of sources, and that's why I didn't make it into the story, because didn't have enough verification. But it seems to be different based on location. But this is an army-wide issue. This is a readiness issue. There needs to be. I think this is a problem that's only solved with real buy-in from Congress to introduce some bill or cut some sort of red tape building new barracks. And that only happens, as you know, and your listeners know, they're smart people. Congress only does things when they're lobbied. They need to be told there's an issue, and the people telling them an issue have to have credentials. So again, sergeant majors, this is why local leadership needs to advocate and explain these issues to the public, because that explanation is the only way to get attention, and that attention is the only way you're going to get action and funding from Congress.
Well, I regret to inform you that instead of that, all we're going to do is put in some anti-wokeness bills for the military.
I mean, you could also do that. That all that makes yeah, yeah. That's a whole Jesus. That's a whole other issue.
So one more thing, Steve. We still have a little bit of time, and as a fellow part timer in the Army, I'm kind of excited about this one. Don't do it. Senior leaders say soldiers should stop taking mandatory online classes. Uh, do you guys in the National Guard have to do a lot of these, like the online
So
classes?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, for the listeners, the soldiers have to do roughly 12 mandatory online classes. This is your suicide prevention, your sexual assault prevention, your cyber awareness,
Log,
uh,
war.
seer training, which all those things sound very important in vacuums to people who might not be aware, right? You hear cyber awareness training, you're like, yeah, you should know you shouldn't put thumb drives in government computers and leave your military ID lying around. Suicide prevention, yeah, we have suicide problems, so like a suicide prevention class, right? But these are all classes people click through. There's not much thought put into it. It's a huge waste of time. Now, I've been in most of my guard units have been Cav infantry units, so we've been more focused on the shooty bang bang stuff. Um, we've kind of we pick one week in a month and just kind of do what we can with 4 computers and a bad internet connection. So out of the 12, maybe get 1 or 2. So I guess the commander can go to someone and say they tried. But I've heard of people where the units actually take it seriously, and if you did everything you're supposed to do, I mean, for at least in the National Guard, the active duty, they it's their full time job. I'm sure they can find a day or two to do it. But the National Guard the reserve is what this impacts most, because if you actually do all those classes, that's a significant part of your training year. I'm an NCO. I get soldiers 2-3 days a month. Like, we need to do room clearing, we need to do weapons stuff, PT, vehicle maintenance stuff. But then, a 20-30% of the year they're just locked away behind a computer. And mind you, as you know, these websites also don't work very well, so you're fighting with the IT half the time.
And
So it's not just
you can't do them at home either. You can't just be like, can I just do these on my good network at home? Like, do you have a card reader? Yes, cool. 50% of the time, it's just not going to work. And also, all of these websites have no up to date certificates. So if you're like me, I'm an IT person. I know how to work around it. Your average soldier is not an IT person that should have to do that. So the not only are these classes kind of useless, especially on a yearly basis, they're also impossible to get into. Like, it's not like, it would be really great if the Army was just like, you need to take mandatory classes, go to mandatoryclasses.gov, and here's all the mandatory classes. If you're a
oh yeah,
reservist,
just
click here,
finding them
here's
is a
everything.
disaster.
Yeah, because like half of them are on the JKO, or half of them are on some TRADOC site, or iCore or something. Like, I remember they gave us these, and they're just like, yeah, you have to type in these massively long URLs to get to it. Like, it's the most insane way of doing it. And like, I know this shit's contracted out. And like, I don't understand how like I can go to a regular, civilian training site, like for my regular job, where we have a training website because we're a large company, and everything is like, I mean, look, there's problems, obviously, but nothing like what the Army goes through. And I just don't understand why. Like, if you're wondering like why we're having mold problems, like our online training and really all of the online anything on the internet that you need to do with the military is basically just internet mold.
Hmm. Yeah. No, yeah. The SMA's comments really rang when he just said, just don't do it. It was in context of a soldier asking him a question. It's like, hey, I got to work on a vehicle and I'm getting pulled away to go do this. And I get what Grinston was trying to communicate was, hey, you still probably got to do this, but man, it really needs to be at the bottom of the list. Like, commanders should not be taking you away from your, an important duty, like maybe servicing a deadline vehicle, or doing, going to a school, or maybe you need to go pick your kid up from school. Like, it shouldn't interrupt things that like really matter. It should be one of those things that if you can do it, go ahead and do it. But put it at the back of the line of your priorities.
Yeah, which is great to have come from the SMA, but like when it's your NCO who's saying the officer said that you came up right on a list, so you need to do this. Like, the problem is that a lot of times and still currently they treat online classes with the same severity as you need to get your dental done. You definitely need to get dental. You need to make sure your teeth are okay. You do not need to take the class on how much gifts how much monetary value a gift you can accept as like a member of an ambassador. None of that shit matters, and we're all looking up the answers on Quizlet anyway. So what the fuck?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as you know, like this is getting all these done is goes on your commander's OER, and that is the Army loves metrics, and that is just the easiest. If I get my squad all if they're shit hot on room clearing, there's no metric for that. But you say, hey, I'm 100% on cyber awareness, sharp, and suicide prevention. That's a real number and on
And
an
I run
OER.
a 300 on the PT test. So
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
now 600. Now 600.
600. Oh, you got to
Yeah,
double it.
ACFT goes live next week. It's really happening.
Yeah. So y'all say it was supposedly happening when I got out 2 years ago too. So
That's true. Yeah, we got a whole week for that thing to get screwed up.
I'm rooting for you guys. I'm very glad that I don't have to do it, but I'm rooting for the rest of you.
I think soldiers have come around on it. It was real ugly there for a while. A lot of people complain, but I think I got a story I'm kind of working on about it. But it seems
It looks fun.
it seems people are coming around on it.
It looks like you got this overhand throw. You've got all these stations. It looks more like the ACFT now. It looks more like a circuit workout or a real training. Like when you do APF, when you do regular PT, like your morning whatever, and you go, sometimes maybe you go through the army stuff. Sometimes maybe you go to the gym. You can vary it, you can mix it up a little bit, but the PT test is just like, all right, we're gonna do push-ups, sit-ups, 2-mile runs, and then we're all gonna fuck off. So it's nice. It is nice that it looks like it's fun. Maybe Steve, I don't. I will pitch this to you. Getting Old Soldier to come back and do an ACFT and see what they think about it after being out. I don't know where I could do something like that, but I'd be willing to try it. I'd be willing to see like kind of how it works based, compared to everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad. There's some good stuff. I don't know. It got me into doing sled drags, which is probably a good workout.
Yeah. Sounds good. The unfortunate thing is I can't do sled drags at home though, which was one of the big problems is how do the part-timers train for something like this?
Yeah. There's nowhere for me to throw a ball, but I throw far enough, but probably I can't really work towards maxing it, unfortunately, easily.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Steve, I want to thank you for coming on and talking about your stories, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome, man. Hey, thanks for having me, and appreciate it.
Yeah, you can follow Steve online. Follow his reporting at military.com. And what's your Twitter handle?
Just at Stephen Beynon.
There you go. Everybody, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.